Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Kareem. Today I'm starting a new format for this channel, which is something that I hope to do at the end of every month. So basically the point of these wrap-up videos is to talk about the books that I read in the previous month. I do something similar for music on my Instagram page, which you should go ahead and follow it if you don't already. Today is April 9th, so I know it's a bit late. But it's fine. Today I want to talk about the 5 books that I read in the month of January. The first book that I read this year is Beyrouth-sur-Seine by Sabine Rousseau. What a great way to start the year, because this was such an incredible read. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The author of this book is the son of Lebanese immigrants, but he was born and raised in Paris in France. And in this book he has conversations with his parents where he asks them questions about what it was like for them to leave Lebanon and immigrate to France during the Lebanese Civil War, which lasted 15 years from 1975 to 1990. Basically, he's trying to understand what it was like for them to experience the war from afar. This story hit too close to home sometimes. I was able to relate to it on such a deep and personal level because I come from a similar background as the author. I'm Syrian and Lebanese, but I've never lived there. So his need to understand his heritage, his family, his country, and why it is the way it is today is also mine. I've asked myself the same questions, I've wondered about the same things, and by reading this book I was able to learn things that I didn't know about the war, things that were never explained to me. There's this line in the book on the last page, and it's not a spoiler, I promise. So the author is saying, "Je suis né à Beyrouth dans une rue de Paris," which translates to, I was born in Beirut on a street in Paris. And I feel like this line sums up the book so well, because essentially this book is about the parts of your heritage that you take with you wherever you go and that you pass on to your children. This book was such an emotional read. Ironically, I was on a train coming back to Paris when I finished it. I would absolutely recommend this book to every person, even if you're not from that region of the world, because the themes are universal. However, the book is written in French and I don't think there are any plans to translate it to English, so I guess this is just for the Frenchies today, but I just really wanted to talk about it because it really touched me and I think it is going to stay with me for quite a while. The next book that I read was To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. Now, if you watched my top 10 books of 2022 video, you know that I loved A Little Life, so I was really excited to pick up her newest release. This book is divided into 3 sections that are completely separate and distinct. The stories and the characters are independent from one another, but they all share the same themes of family and this idea of utopia. Now, I have only read the first 2 sections of this book. It's not a DNF. I do plan to finish it at one point during this year, so I'm only gonna talk about the first 2 sections today. The first section is a love story. We basically follow a man called David who lives with his grandfather. He has to choose between an arranged marriage or marrying someone that he loves. I really liked this story. I found the characters to be so well written. I was invested. I wanted to find out who David was gonna end up with, but this book ends in an open-ended way, and this strategy is hit or miss. Sometimes I think it's interesting to let the reader interpret and choose the ending, but this time it was just frustrating because this type of story needed a clear ending. So yeah, this is my only criticism of the first section of the book. The second section of this book is divided into 2 parts. The first one examines a relationship between 2 people that come from different social backgrounds, and so it has very interesting observations about what this causes in the dynamic of the relationship. So that was really interesting to read about. The second part, though, felt like a complete 180. It became something else in terms of format, POV, and even genre. It just took me out of the story, and overall I was just confused by this second part. I didn't understand why it was added. I think this is what I feel about this book overall so far. I'm just confused. I don't understand what Hanya was trying to convey. I don't understand what she was trying to do with these stories, honestly. However, I do want to point out that the writing is so good. This style of descriptive writing is not something that I gravitate towards, but Hanya makes it work for me. I just love her writing so much, and I think it's one of the things that has kept me reading. Next, I read Elektra by Jennifer Saint, which is a Greek mythology retelling that follows the events that led to the Trojan War, but through the perspective of three female characters, so Clytemnestra, Elektra, and Cassandra. Obviously, this book made me think of The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, because it is also set during the Trojan War, but we follow different characters, Patroclus and Achilles. But I was actually glad that I read that beforehand, because while reading Elektra, I was able to see the parallels between the two stories, and what was interesting was that, from what I remember, in The Song of Achilles, these characters are barely mentioned, if at all, even though they play such a huge role. And I feel like that's sort of representative of Greek mythology in general. These stories are always told through the perspective of the male hero, and women are usually either just the villain or they're minor characters. And so to have this perspective from these three female characters felt like a breath of fresh air, and it just gave more depth to the story. I really loved those characters. I was rooting for them even though they were flawed and I didn't always agree with their decisions, but I understood their motives. I empathized with them. The writing by Jennifer Saint is incredible. It is lyrical, it is poetic at times, but still accessible. Throughout this book, there's this atmosphere of dread. You know something tragic is going to happen. I mean, it is Greek mythology, but I still found myself hoping for a better and different ending for these characters. Overall, I think this is my favorite Greek mythology retelling because of the characters, because of the writing, and I cannot wait to read more by Jennifer Saint. I think she has another book coming out this year. I will definitely be checking it out. Next up, I read Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Now, first of all, look at this beautiful edition that I was able to get. Look at the end papers, and it's signed by the author, so that's really cool. Now, what is this book about? Basically, we follow a girl called Olivia Pryor who lives in an orphanage, and all she has left is this journal from her mother in which you can clearly tell that she has descended into madness. And one day she receives a letter from an uncle that she didn't even know existed before, who is inviting her back to her home called Gallant. But once she goes there, she discovers that nobody was expecting her and that uncle actually passed away years ago. And weird things are happening in that house. You can see ghouls roaming the hallways. So it's either she stays and tries to uncover the secrets of this mansion and of what happened to her family, or she goes back to the orphanage where she was mistreated. Honestly, this book was okay. I did finish it super quickly because I was intrigued. I wanted to find out how it was going to end, but I just felt indifferent to the main character and to whatever was happening to her. This book was supposed to, be spooky, and I was supposed to feel, freaked out, but I felt none of those feelings. For some reason, I just was not able to connect to this book. And then the final reveal wasn't that shocking. It's not unlike anything I've seen or read before. But I feel like this time it's more of a it's me, I'm the problem, it's me, not the book type of situation, because this book reminded me of Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is sort of a similar story, and I also didn't like that one. So I'm thinking that maybe Gothic novels are just not my cup of tea. If you're into Gothic novels, if you're into stories about haunted houses, I think you could enjoy this, but it was not for my personal taste. Finally, I read The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. Now, this is one of the most popular books in the past 2 years, and I was so intrigued by it because it is set in a world where magic exists, and we follow 6 magicians who are invited to join this elite society where they can have access to more power and secrets. But the thing is, only 5 of them will actually become members of this society, so they have to compete against each other to secure their place. So there's magic, there's rivalry, and there are multiple POVs. This book started so well. I loved the first chapters where we are introduced to the different characters, but once they arrived to the academy, I just lost interest. I don't know if it's just me, but I did not understand the magic system. Even after finishing this book, I still don't understand. I didn't understand what they were studying. I didn't understand what they were doing in the academy. During the fighting scenes, I was just confused. So that's issue number 1. My second issue was that even though the characters are fleshed out and we have a lot of background information on them, I still felt like they were surface level human beings, if that makes sense. They didn't have clear motives, and even the dynamic, the relationships between them were forced. We were told that this person hates this person, but we never understand why. One of the characters even goes through a corruption arc, but again, it just was not credible. They change motives and perspective all of a sudden. The middle section dragged and dragged. I just couldn't wait for it to finish. At one point, I stopped trying to understand what was happening. I just went with it because I was just tired of trying and rereading passages. And then at the end, there's this big reveal that is shocking, yes, but it's because it just came out of nowhere. Nothing in the book was leading up to it, so it just felt so out of place. The second book in this series, The Alice Paradox, came out a couple of months ago, but I think I'm gonna stop reading this series. I really wanted to like this book. I was hoping to find a new favorite series potentially, but sadly that was not the case. So these are the 5 books that I read in the month of January. If I had to pick a favorite, it would be between Beyrouth-sur-Seine and Elektra, but possibly Beyrouth-sur-Seine because it just felt like a more personal read that will stick with me, I think, far longer than Elektra. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them. I would love to read your opinions and thoughts and maybe challenge my own. I should be filming the February and March wrap-up soon, so stay tuned for those. And in the meantime, take care of yourself and I'll see you in the next one.